The weather controls all kinds of farming operations. We need to make sure that the nutrients we put onto the land are on the land and not in the watercourse. So we don't want heavy rain to be forecast within the next 48 hours. If possible, it is ideal if there's a little bit of dampness in the soil to melt the fertiliser or to make sure that the slurry gets properly into the soil and get it into the plant. That is the ideal, but we certainly do not want too much rain coming to wash it away.
Water is a big issue on the farm, particularly as we've had very wet summers and sometimes very wet winters over the last few years, and we're in a very steep north-facing slope. So the danger all the time is that we get erosion of soil and then we get runoff of fertility or we get runoff of dung from the land into watercourses and out at the farm.
Slurry is a valuable nutrient on farms, as a valuable fertiliser, and we want to use that fertiliser wisely. Slurry is potentially a pollutant as well, not just as big a pollutant as silage effluent, but still potentially it can cause a lot of problems. The slurry is stored in tanks until the springtime or summertime, and then it is taken out and sprayed in the land.
This is part of the systems we're putting in place on the farm to minimise diffuse pollution. This wavy coil here is coming out of a ditch which takes the runoff from in front of the cattle sheds. So it's not cattle dung, but it's things like the mud and the silage that when we're putting it into the cattle. There is nutrients in there, and we're trying to make sure again that that doesn't go into the farm ditches and leave the farm and also mess up the watercourses. So here we've got a little wavy coil that comes out and into a little bank of willow trees, which is part of our agroforestry schemes on the farm. So the willows are doing a lot of useful work on the farm, but the point is we're using this little bit of nutrients to feed the willows and to improve growth on the willows, and they're essentially taking up the nutrients rather than letting them go into the groundwater. So you can see here from the flush of grass here that there are some nutrients coming out of that ditch which we're making use of. And the sheep that are lambing in this field at the moment are having a good chomp on the grass as well. So again, it's just trying to keep all the fertility that we've got on the farm staying where it is rather than losing it into the water and disappearing from the farm.
And we want to try and use as much of our own manures as fertilisers as possible to avoid having to buy in bag nitrogen, which costs money and also can use up valuable resources.
Lots of things are important for us on the farm. The most important one as an organic farm is keeping the fertility we have on the farm and building fertility. We can't put nitrogen on the farm out of a bag, so we have to make our own fertility and keep the fertility we've got. We're standing here in some willow trees. We've got 10 rows of willow trees across this field, and they provide nutrient cycling. So they'll take up nutrients from quite deep in the ground, and when they drop their leaves, you're getting those nutrients onto the fields where you want them.
Fertilisers are sprayed to make the grass grow better, and we want to try and use fertilisers at the time of the year whenever you get the most response. So either with artificial fertilisers or slurry, you want to try and put it on when there's maybe a wee bit of dampness in the ground and yet there's not a big surge of rain forecast. So we use the weather forecast to try and make sure that we put these valuable resources on at a time when we're getting full use of them, not waste them and not have them washed down the river where they can cause pollution and cause fish kill. Whenever we plant a reseed, we would plant clovers, white clover in a grazing area, because white clover can take nitrogen out of the air, so that means you can use less bag nitrogen. Also, we have grown a few crops of red clover, which makes very good silage. It's very high in protein, which cuts down the amount of protein that has to be imported into the country. And cattle and sheep perform very well on red clover silage. The advantage of using clover in a sward is that the mineral balance is different, and cattle and sheep will grow better on a clover grass sward than a pure grass sward. There's higher calcium and certain other minerals, and they do very well. Clover fixes its own nitrogen with little nodules on the roots, which means you can get away with using far less nitrogen, and that is the big advantage of clover. It has a slight disadvantage of a seasonal growth pattern. In other words, it doesn't grow well early in the spring and late in the year, but it grows well at a time whenever maybe the grass starts to ease off in the middle of the summer, and it does provide very nutritious and very high performing fuel for animals.
What we're doing here in this paddock is we've subdivided it into 4 smaller paddocks, and as you can see, we've used double fencing. We've got pigs in one of the paddocks at the moment, and those rotate around these 4 areas in different seasons, again to reduce the worm burden for the pigs, but also, as you can see, when they're on there, they chew up all the grass. So we'll be following the pigs this spring with a root crop to use some of the nutrients from the pigs being in the field. And then we'll put it back into grass, and then eventually the chickens will get on it, and then the pigs will get on the last year of grass and chew it up, and then we start again.